Sweden. Country of origin, and worth starting here only to establish the contrast, because IKEA's flat-pack, self-assembly, low-cost model was built specifically around Scandinavian retail conditions, high labor costs, price-conscious consumers, and a culture comfortable with self-service, conditions that don't automatically exist everywhere else IKEA has tried to expand. What worked flawlessly at home became the exact model that created friction abroad. Japan. IKEA's first attempt to enter Japan came in 1974, and it failed so completely that the company pulled out of the country entirely by 1986, not returning again until 2006, a full 20-year retreat. The core problem was cultural mismatch layered on top of practical mismatch. Japanese consumers at the time were accustomed to full-service furniture retail, delivery included, assembly included, and the entire concept of self-assembly furniture read as a downgrade rather than a value proposition, the opposite of how IKEA had successfully positioned itself in Europe. Japanese apartments also tended to be significantly smaller than the spacious Swedish showroom displays assumed, meaning much of IKEA's original catalog simply didn't fit the actual living spaces of its target customers. When IKEA returned in 2006, it came back with a fundamentally redesigned approach: smaller format furniture, delivery and assembly services bundled in as standard rather than optional, essentially abandoning the core self-assembly identity that defined the brand everywhere else, just to make the model viable in this specific market. United States. IKEA's American expansion succeeded overall, but it faced a long, expensive period of trial and error before finding its footing, and it never fully replicated its European dominance. Early American stores struggled because US consumers were accustomed to significantly larger furniture, deeper sofas, bigger beds, more generously sized everything, compared to IKEA's originally Scandinavian proportioned product line, forcing the company to redesign large portions of its catalog specifically for the American market, rather than simply exporting its existing lineup. Measurement conventions created friction too. IKEA's metric-based sizing had to be reworked for a market still operating almost entirely in imperial units, a seemingly small detail that nonetheless required significant catalog and labeling overhauls. IKEA also underestimated how central car culture and suburban geography would need to shape store placement, ultimately building most American locations as large-format suburban destinations, requiring a significant drive, rather than the more urban, accessible locations common in parts of Europe. Russia. IKEA entered Russia in 2000 and grew into one of its largest markets globally by the 2010s, making its eventual, near-total exit following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, one of the most abrupt reversals in the company's history. Beyond the geopolitical exit itself, IKEA's earlier years in Russia were defined by a different kind of struggle entirely, navigating a business environment where bureaucratic corruption and demands for bribes were, according to IKEA's own public statements over the years, a near-constant obstacle to store openings and construction permits. IKEA became notably outspoken about refusing to pay bribes as a matter of corporate policy, a stance that reportedly delayed store openings by years in some cases, illustrating a market where the company's core European business practices around transparency and process directly clashed with entrenched local expectations. IKEA didn't open its first Indian store until 2018, decades after establishing itself across most of the developed world, and the delay traces directly back to India's strict foreign direct investment regulations governing single-brand retail. For years, Indian law required a significant percentage of goods sold by foreign retailers to be sourced locally, a requirement IKEA's globally standardized supply chain wasn't originally built to accommodate. Beyond regulatory hurdles, IKEA also had to fundamentally rethink its business model for Indian consumers specifically, shifting away from its traditionally car-dependent, suburban big-box format towards smaller, more accessible city center locations better suited to Indian urban density and shopping habits, alongside menu changes in its in-store restaurants, reflecting local dietary norms and a significant vegetarian population. China. IKEA has operated in China since 1998, and while the stores themselves became genuinely popular, the company ran into a uniquely Chinese problem that no amount of pricing or product strategy could have anticipated. Many Chinese consumers began treating IKEA showrooms less as a shopping destination and more as a free public lounging space, napping on display beds, sitting for extended periods in living room displays, essentially using the store as an air-conditioned rest stop, rather than converting into paying customers at anywhere near the rate IKEA saw in other markets. IKEA's response required a delicate balancing act, tolerating the behavior for years to avoid damaging its welcoming brand image, while gradually introducing subtle policy adjustments, a genuinely unusual retail challenge specific to how Chinese consumers initially engaged with the concept of a Western-style browsable showroom. Saudi Arabia and the broader Gulf region. IKEA's expansion into conservative Gulf markets required significant catalog modification, well beyond simple translation, most notably the controversial 2012 decision to digitally remove women entirely from photographs in the Saudi Arabian version of its catalog, replacing images that included women in the original international version with edited photos showing only men or empty rooms. The move generated substantial international backlash and public criticism once discovered, with IKEA's Swedish headquarters publicly stating the decision contradicted the company's own stated values around gender equality, illustrating the genuine tension multinational retailers face when adapting content for markets with significantly different social and legal norms around gender representation. South Korea. IKEA entered South Korea in 2014 and encountered immediate, organized resistance from the country's politically influential Association of Small and Medium-Sized Furniture Retailers, who lobbied government officials directly to restrict IKEA's operations, arguing the foreign giant threatened to devastate the existing domestic furniture industry the way large-format foreign retailers had disrupted small retailers elsewhere. Local suppliers and furniture makers organized protests and public campaigns specifically targeting IKEA's entry, forcing the company to navigate a genuinely hostile initial public relations environment before eventually establishing a stable, accepted presence in the market. Putting it together. So when you look at IKEA's uneven, decades-long global expansion, here's what you're actually looking at. A business model built around one very specific set of Scandinavian assumptions: self-assembly acceptance, standardized apartment sizing, car-based suburban shopping, low bribery business environments, and gender-neutral marketing, tested against dramatically different cultural, legal, and economic conditions in nearly every country it entered. Japan rejected the self-assembly model outright until IKEA fundamentally redesigned its approach. America demanded bigger furniture and different measurement systems. Russia demanded navigating institutional corruption IKEA refused to participate in. India demanded waiting out foreign investment law for decades. China demanded tolerating an entirely unanticipated use of its own showrooms. Saudi Arabia demanded a catalog decision that contradicted the company's own values. South Korea demanded surviving organized domestic industry backlash. IKEA didn't fail in any of these markets in the way a company simply goes bankrupt and disappears. It struggled, adapted, sometimes retreated entirely for years or decades, and eventually found a version of itself that worked, market by market, compromise by compromise, proving that even one of the most standardized, globally consistent retail brands on Earth couldn't simply export its Swedish blueprint, unchanged, and expect it to work everywhere. Subscribe to Faulty Blueprint, because every failure, every struggle, every forced compromise has a design behind it, and we're just getting started.